Hey everybody, welcome to our video on Microsoft Access split databases and working with connection strings. So in this video we're talking about Microsoft Access split databases, and by that I mean an application that's composed of at least two Access database files. One file that we call the front end contains your user interface elements such as your forms and reports, macros and VBA queries, and the other database that contains your data tables, and we call that one the Backend database. And you have linkages from the front end to the back end. Your tables from your front end are actually links to tables that are in the back end database. In this video I want to talk about the connection strings that we see in our linked tables. This is our front end database that I'm showing here, and these table entries are not tables that exist in our front end. They're tables that exist in our back end, and there are connection strings that the front end here uses to find the tables in the other database. And I want to look at the VBA that allows us to see the full connection string. Then I want to move on to the VBA that allows us to modify these connection strings. In other words, to mimic the functionality provided by the linked table manager. So let's take a look at a form I've built for this. This form, let's take a look at it in design view very quickly. There we go. So we've got a list box with two columns in it. I have a button for refreshing the list box and a button for changing the linkage of the connection strings for our linked tables. So let's bring it back into form view. What we see here is upon form load, I'm running the code behind this refresh button, and it loops through the tables in our database and determines which ones are linked tables. And when it finds a linked table, it retrieves the connection string and displays it in the second column of this list box. So let's take a look at our code. Okay, so here's our refresh button right here. You can see here it's calling refresh list, and here's the form load code that also calls refresh list. All right, so here's refresh list. The first thing we do for refreshing the list is we clear out the row source for that list box, make sure it's empty so we don't keep adding entries to it. In other words, we want to always start with a fresh list and just show each table one time. Then we set up a loop. We have TDF here is declared as a DAO table def object. Table defs are entries or objects that describe all the table objects in our database. And it's a collection, so we can loop through them. Okay, we have a for each loop. We're going to loop through each table def in the table def collection, and then we determine if a table is linked or not by looking at the table def.connect property. The connect property holds the connection string for the table. And you can either look at the length of the connect property. If it's 0, it's not a linked table, or if it's an empty string, it's not a linked table. If there's anything in here, in this property, then it's a linked table. So we go into this if, and we're going to build a string that goes into our list box. And this is where it gets a little bit funky. Maybe I shouldn't have used a list box because the syntax is a little bit weird. But I have two columns in our list box. In the first column I want to put the name of the table that we found, tdf.name. And in the second column I want to put the connection string, tdf.connect. The rest of the syntax here is syntax we needed just to make this work in a list box. When you add an item to a list box in Microsoft Access, you add a semicolon between the items. So this goes in our first column of the list box, and all this goes in the second column of our list box. However, there's one additional wrinkle with a list box. Because the delimiter for the list box is a semicolon, and guess what the delimiter is for our connection string? It is a semicolon. We had to add a little bit extra syntax here to get all that to go into the correct column in the list box. So we have 4 double quotes surrounding the connection string in order to get the semicolons that are part of this string to actually go into a single column in the list box instead of getting spread out and making a mess in our list box. So this builds the string item that we're going to put in our list box, and then me.listTables, which is our list box, .addItem method, we simply add that string. And we loop through each table in our database to do this. And we end up with this. Our parts table right here. We can hover over it and see just the path, or we can look over here at the entire connection string and see that the first item over here is MS Access. That's telling Access that, of course, that the table we're linked to is in an Access database. For, let's say, you're linking to a SQL Server database backend using ODBC, this first entry will be ODBC instead of MS Access. Our second entry here is password. Okay, I have a very secure password there, test pass, right? Now semicolon, and then database equals, and here is the full path to our backend. So let's take a look at the code behind the change linkage button. What happens when we want to change or relink our tables and change locations, say, of the backend database, or change our password? That code is in here. So under our change button, the click event of our change button, what we have first is we're going to pop up a file browser dialog box. The only functionality I'm providing behind this refresh linkage button, or this change linkage button, is changing the path. If you want to change the password, you'd have to add some additional code, to be able to do that. So we are just going to, in this example, show how to change the location of your backend. And the reason I'm doing that is I'm leading up to the next video where we're going to have some code that automatically relinks your backends and your front ends when you deploy. So that's why I'm focusing on the file right now. So we're going to pop up the file dialog box with this function here, get file folder, which is below here. Now, I don't want to spend much time on the get file folder function because I've covered it in so many other videos. I'll put a link in the description below to a video on how the open file dialog box works. But very quickly, I'm passing in a string here to tell it whether I'm looking for a file or a folder, and I'm passing in a title to what we want to put at the top of the dialog box. We're passing in file in this case, so the type of picker we're going to choose is the MSO file dialog picker. We set and a reference to our file dialog box, telling it it's going to be a file picker, right, which is coming from here. And from there, we open it using our title, saying multi-select is false. We're giving it a default path to start in, just to make it easy for us in this video to get to where we know we're going. In your application, you probably have a different starting location, or might even want to use a special folder as a starting location. And then we test whether or not they chose something. If they chose something, we're going to return the file as the value of our function, which is a string here. So back up here to get file folder. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to test to see if they did choose something, and if they didn't, we're going to get out. We're going to give them a message saying you chose to abort by not choosing a file, not choosing a backend, and we're going to get out. So next we're going to create a file system object using late binding. Up above here I have a file FSO defined as an object. So create object scripting.filesystemObject goes into FSO, and below that we're going to use that to take a look at the file that was chosen. So next we're testing the file extension of the file that was returned from our file dialog box by using the file system object get extension name of the file that was chosen. We only want to look in this file if it's an ACCDB or a DE or a DR. Now there's an alternate way of having done this. We could have put this as a filter in our file dialog down here. Now this is a more generic version of the file dialog, so I didn't take time to do that for this video. That probably would have been a better way to go, perhaps having that as yet another parameter to our file dialog function. But I didn't do that. We're kind of going quick and dirty here. If we've chosen an Access database in our file browser, then we'll go into this if. Then we're going to loop through, just like in the last click event, the table defs in our current database, looking at the table def connection, looking at the table def connect property, and in this case I'm testing the length this time instead of whether it's an empty string. If the length is greater than 0, it's a linked table. And what we're looking to do here is we're looking to, in this connection string, we want to replace this file name with the new file name we've chosen in the file dialog. Okay. However, we have a password here. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to extract this password and save it so that when we rebuild our connection string, we can rebuild it with the correct password. So over here, what we're going to do here, we have some code here that's meant to find the password. We have an integer, I defined as an integer, in string, the connection string we're looking for the string pwd equal sign. This gives us, let's head over here, I is going to give us the starting position of the password parameter. Oops, wrong window. J is also an integer in string. We're going to start looking at position I, look in the connection string, and we're going to look for the first semicolon we come to after pwd equals. Okay, that's why we're using the starting position parameter in the in-string function. So here we're looking for J. We're looking for this semicolon. So we started looking here, looking for the first semicolon we come to after that. So that gives us this starting position and this ending position. We're going to extract the password from here. Then we're going to set our database password equal to, we're going to use the mid function again to get at the connection string that's in here. And we're looking for starting position of I, which is this P, I plus 4. PWD equals sign is 4. So we're looking for starting to get a string from where this red T is, right? The connection string I plus 4 is our starting position, and then this is the length parameter here, J minus I minus 4. So looking for J minus I minus 4. So I is this starting position here. So subtracting I from here is like subtracting this green word, and subtracting 4 is subtracting the PWD equal sign. So that gives us just this word, test pass, in our PWD variable, which is a string. Now that we have the password for this table, we're going to build a connection string. This is also a string variable. Build a connection string. MS access semicolon PWD equals our password we just built, semicolon database equals, and the file name that we chose in the file dialog. Then I'm only going to actually refresh the link if they're different. Okay, if connection string we just built is different from the TDF connect we're working with, if they're different, we'll set TDF connect equal to the new connection string, and then this is the magic here. Okay, nothing happens if you don't do this. You have to do tdf.refresh link. Use this method. If you don't do this part, okay, the connection string doesn't get changed. And then we simply loop to the next table def in the collection and do that over and over again. And then we refresh our list that we're going to show on the screen. Now there's a potential weakness to this method or this approach, and that is, what if you had a gigantic database such that you needed more than one backend? Let's say you have 2 backend database files. Okay, this wouldn't work for you because this method is going to set all of your table linkages to the same file name. All right, and so if you have multiple backends, you're going to need something else to help you know which backend to link which table to. I would think that would put that in a table, and I think that would put that in my front end, and have maybe just for each table name have maybe the short name of the database file, just the last portion of the name. Database 1 underscore BE and database 2 underscore BE, something along those lines. And then you could choose use your file dialog box to choose the file and path for database 1, and then repeat it and choose the use the file dialog box to choose the file name or the folder for database 2. Let's head back over to our database. Now what I want to do here, I'm going to close our database because I want to break our linkages. So we're going to drag our Explorer window over here, and I'm going to select both of these databases. This is the database we've been working in. I'm going to cut it. I'm going to move it to this folder. Okay. And I'm going to reopen. This is the front end. We're going to reopen it. Now notice nothing's broken yet, okay? Because we haven't tried to access these tables. Let's open our form. Okay, so here is our old connection string, our old path. Okay, notice down here, access to DBs /temp, the name of our backend. Okay, we're going to change that in a second. Let's try to get at one of these tables. You can see here we've broken the linkage, we've moved the backend to a different location. The backend is no longer in this location, so it can't find this file. Okay, so let's use our code. We're already in the right folder. There's our backend. Click OK. Notice we refresh the display here now. The temp is gone from the file name. Now let's take a look, and we're back in again. Each of our tables. So what I intend to do in our next video is to take what we've used here and use it as a building point. I'm also going to take what we've shown in file reading and the file writing videos, and we're going to have a setup where we have a database that is programmed to, upon startup, check a table and see if it can get to it. And if it can't, we're going to say, uh-oh, we've moved the location of our database. We need to relink. It's going to read a text file to determine where it should look for the back end. Should it look in the same folder that our front end is in, or should it look in a different folder? We'll put a folder name for it to look in, and then it will go and use the code that we just looked at and relink all the tables in the back end based on if it can find the right back end in the folder that's in that file. And the idea is you have one file on your development machine that points to the folder structure on your machine, and you have a different file on your customer's machine that points to that works with the folder structure on their machine. So you copy your front end from your development machine onto your client's machine, and it starts up, it can't find the tables, it goes into this automatic relinking code and just relinks itself for you. You don't have to worry about it. So that's in the next video. I hope you got something out of this video. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.